Hello everyone and welcome to this, our third of the webinar series where we're going to look at some of the hot Microsoft topics. In this webinar we're going to be looking at Enterprise Mobility Suite or EMS, and I'm joined through this presentation by two of my colleagues, Nico Senhart, who is a Microsoft MVP and our Innovation Manager based out of Belgium, and for the Q&A session later, Carl Dillo, who's our Deployment Manager based here in the UK. So what I thought I'd do before we kind of kick off and I hand over to Nico is give a brief introduction to Getronics and who we are. You may or may not have heard of us. We are a global provider of workspace solutions, basically providing to a large number of customers 24/7 follow-the-sun support around the globe, providing support for their workspace and other workspace-based solutions. We have a direct presence in about 18 countries. And can deliver services to customers via partners in about another 90 countries. So this allows us to have a large presence globally to deliver workspace solutions for customers. We have 5 solution centers, which we'll talk about in a second, and we can support 22 different languages worldwide. It also is worth mentioning where our credibility is in the Microsoft space. We've been a Microsoft partner now for over 30 years and gold certified in a number of areas for the last 15. We have over 200 employees who have all of the current Microsoft certifications around a whole different swathe of different technologies. Plus, we also have a Microsoft Most Valued Professional, which is Nico, in the enterprise mobility space, hence his reason for doing the EMS presentation today. You can see on the slide in front of you where we have our current gold and silver competencies. But I guess the kind of key message from this slide is the kind of last point at the bottom is our experience in providing support solutions, migration solutions, and a whole wrap around that in complex architectures across the globe. So be that for EMS, which we'll talk about today, and in webinar 2 where we spoke about Windows 10, and webinar 1 where we talked about Office 365. So this slide really is just a kind of snapshot of the agenda. This is in no particular order of the kind of topics that Nico's going to cover. So he's going to look at how we kind of keep control over devices, or your devices that are basically outside of your main domain. How to use EMS to empower your end users, because it's really all about the end users at the end of the day. How you can benefit from simplified cloud licensing, which we also touched on in the other 2 webinars as well. And how we can maximize the value you get from your licensing, and what we can do to support you wherever you are on the globe. And now I'd like to hand over to Nico.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Also from my side, welcome for joining this webinar. So I will drill down a little bit more deeper into the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So first of all, a small pitch. Why is it so important? We all know that our users are coming in with a lot of devices, personal devices. They want to actually read or access your corporate data on these devices. So as an internal IT, you have a challenge to provision that data on, let's say, a very user-friendly way, but keep in mind, of course, the security aspects. So if you start to look into the market and think about an end-to-end enterprise mobility solution, so it's going just much further than only mobile device management, you will see that a lot of vendors are kicking in on the market. So we talk about identity and access management, mobile device management, and information protection. So protecting the data, your mobile data, even if it's on the device or even when it's go away from that device. So if you look into the market, we see that we have actually quite some vendors that are doing one piece of the puzzle, let's say. We really don't say that they are doing a bad job, certainly not. But you understand directly that buying different vendors will be expensive. Also, the integration with each other will be actually more complex. So that's why Microsoft has seen the light, let's say, by releasing an Enterprise Mobility Suite, which is actually covering completely that end-to-end enterprise story. And if you translate then that to technology, we talk about Azure AD Premium, Windows or Microsoft Intune, and Azure RMS, so the rights management service part. During the presentation, I will go a little bit more deeper on that. For the sake of time, I cannot demonstrate each piece, of course, but for sure you will have a good idea by the end of the webinar. If you compare it a little bit further, we talk about the traditional PC management. You have typically the competitors of configuration manager like Lendesk and Altiris and so on. If you want to do mobile device management, we talk about Mobilearen, AirWatch, Good. If you want to protect files, you have another vendor. If you want to protect SaaS applications, same story. And guess what? For your identity and access management, you also need another vendor there. And that's actually the great story that Microsoft has today. So for Config Manager, which they have 70% market share on the market, they are still growing. So I suppose most of you guys on the call are using that technology. You can still have that, of course, but the beauty about the story is that it's nearly integrates with the Enterprise Mobility Suite. So you also see here some list pricing. Of course, for the exact pricing, you can talk with us or with your licensing reseller, but it's a subscription-based, the Enterprise Mobility Suite, so you pay per user per month, and the user can have 5 devices. All right, so let's dive now into Azure AD Premium. Actually, that's quite a lot if you translate it to features. The first bit is multi-factor authentication. A password in a mobility world is just not enough anymore. So you probably want an extra authentication bit, which can be an SMS, a phone call, or some security questions. Hybrid identity, we all doing this for the user, as Tony has explained in his introduction. So we have to think about user friendliness. So single sign-on is a very important aspect in this story by making sure that they can access their applications by just entering their Active Directory credentials. Unique security reporting, that's also something where Microsoft scores very well. So you have very interesting reporting where you can see, for instance, if I'm logging on now in London and in 5 minutes someone is doing the same with my credentials in New York, that can be suspicious. So that kind of reporting you can have out of Azure AD Premium. Branding, you will see during the demo that actually your users are working in a browser. So it's important that they have branding so they see immediately that they are in an environment which is familiar for them. Self-service, there is also a piece of self-service in there. So a user can, for instance, reset or unlock his password through the cloud. Group management, very comparable with Active Directory groups. So you as an administrator can put users in certain groups and give them access to applications. Application proxy is also a very interesting one. So that's actually a proxy possibility where you can make sure that your users can also access through the cloud, which I will show you in a second, an application, an HTTPS or an HTTP application that is running on-premise, so running in your own data center. Everything starts, of course, with the control panel. So you need to find one central location, let's say, where users can find their applications, can reset their password, and so on. And there's also something like device registration, also interesting for bring your own stories, where you can say as an administrator, hey, first you have to build a relationship with the corporate environment before you can reach corporate content. That's typically what we will use or achieve with device registration. All right, so I will show you now some pieces of the puzzle in a very short demo. And for that, I will take a chair. So you have to go to a browser, and I will, for the matter of completeness, so it's myapps.microsoft.com. This is typically the center place where users can reach their portal. You see immediately as soon I hit my credentials, meaning even only my username, you can see that the branding is popping up immediately. This is because the FWS Labs is known in Azure. So that's the branding piece you see here. If I enter now my Active Directory password, you'll see that a multi-factor authentication engine kicks in. So I'm waiting for an SMS now, which has arrived. So it's 529-606. I sign in. You can also see that you have different multi-factor verification options. So you can also choose for a phone call or security questions, for instance. Here you see the company portal, but the different tiles, which are actually applications that are assigned to me. So, and now remember, single sign-on is very important. So I have added my Azure AD credentials, and now I just need to hit some buttons, and it will automatically sign me on in the different applications. So I hit for Outlook, for instance, so it's redirecting to Office 365 in this case. I hit it to Salesforce, and you can see that I have single sign-on experience with Salesforce. So very easy to do. You also see there Twitter, for instance. That's also a scenario that we see with customers. where they say, okay, we have a marketing team. We don't really want that they know the Twitter account themselves, so we create a redirection or a single sign-on experience with that social media. And so that's also a scenario. Remember that I talked about the application proxy. So that was doing actually the same experience, but for applications that are running on-premise, so in your own data center. For that, I have this test web application here. It's in fact not a spectacular demo because it's only an IIS web server in our data center that is showing the homepage of IIS within a few seconds, but you understand the idea. And so the complete same single sign-on experience by just getting redirected now not to a SaaS application, but to an application that is running in our data center. For the sake of time, I have to continue now and talking about Microsoft Intune. This is the mobile device management piece of Microsoft. You can have it in two flavors, or you use Intune standalone, and then you typically do all the management in the browser, in a browser, or you can go for the hybrid option, which is actually Intune integrated within Config Manager. We see a lot of customers that are going for that way because, Config Manager has 70% market share. It's even increasing. So a lot of customers want that single pane of glass experience. So you can see that also later on in the demo, we will configure everything in SCCM, which is actually running on-prem, but it's the Intune service that will make sure that your wipe actions, your applications, your other settings will arrive on these devices. So next to Mac, Windows, Linux, you have also the mobile devices here, and you see the vendors there. So we talk about Android, we talk about Apple, we talk about Windows Phone, not BlackBerry, that will not be supported. All right. Mobile application management, I took out that particular feature because that's a big one, let's say. So it's also called sometimes containerization. And what is that? So if you look into competitors of Intune, what they will do is they create a container. They actually collect all the corporate data, corporate applications, corporate settings into that container. The user has to log in separately in that container, and he needs to use container apps, like a mail app, for instance. We have seen regarding user experience that's certainly not ideally. And that's also the same vision that Microsoft has. So what you will see with Intune is that Microsoft will never create, let's say, that kind of containers. What they will do is put that container technology directly into their products. And what is now the most popular software suite in the world? Well, that's Microsoft Office. And that's what this table is explaining. So the recent versions of Office have that Intune capabilities directly into their, or better said, that container capabilities directly into their genes, let's say. So you just need to install that one, enroll into Intune, and you can leverage that container capabilities. What are container capabilities? Typically, you make sure that applications cannot share data with unmatched applications. You want to make sure that there is a PIN before the user is installed. You want to avoid that screenshots are taken. So typically that kind of measurements to secure your data within the applications. You also see Intune companion apps that are appearing in the store. So apps to securely look into movies, PDFs, image viewers. And you have also an interesting one, which is the managed browser. For instance, there you can you can configure some scenarios when a user is receiving an email with a URL inside. User clicks that URL, and instead of opening in the native browser of the vendor, he will open in the managed browser to keep it isolated and secure. By the end of the year, Microsoft is also coming with an SDK. This is typically exposing the APIs to make sure if you are creating an application bottom-up, to put these Intune containerization capabilities directly in your line of business app. So that's why you need that kind of an SDK. Or if you have already an existing line of business application, you can also do a wrapping. So actually you wrap the Intune container capabilities directly, let's say, around your existing line of business app. These wrappers for Android and iOS are already available today. So here you have some demos through screenshots. So you can see that we are using the secure browser here. Before we start the application, a PIN is asked as extra security. You can see in the right corner below that I was not able to take a screenshot, and that's why I took a picture, just to show you also that mem capability to secure your content. And as it's a browser, you can also blacklist or whitelist certain web pages, which you can see here. Talking about the wrapping then, so I took APK file, which is an Android application file. I did the wrapping with the tool that is available on the Microsoft website, and as soon I wrapped the application and deployed the application to my devices, you see that the MEM policies are kicking in. So again, the PIN is showed. Here I was trying to exchange data with an unmanaged application. And what is an unmanaged application? It's an application that you haven't pushed through the Intune channel. And then he says, okay, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm only allowed to share data with other managed apps. Okay, let me show you now quickly the experience of the single pane of glass. So as I mentioned before, you configure everything in configuration manager. So most of you will probably know this console. So this is config manager R2 SP1. There will also be a config manager vNext by the end of the year. But you can see here that you create an Intune subscription. So again, you configure everything in your console, but it's the Intune service that will take care of provisioning your devices. Also interesting is the extensions, which is actually are coming in within your environment. So as soon new features are released, you will receive that kinds of extensions in your environment, and then you have the choice to enable, disable it, and as from then your environment will support it. So you see here very recent ones, for instance iOS 9 support or conditional access extension, but more on conditional access later on. If you deploy an application, you can also see how nicely they have integrated that. So if you create a new app, besides the traditional MSIs and executables, you have it in one drop-down list, in one wizard if you want. You can start to deploy iOS apps, Android apps, Windows Phone apps, or even create deep links to the particular stores. If you talk about settings there, you have quite some possibilities there. So if I create, for instance, a new configuration item, I give it a name. I say it's for a mobile device, next. You will see here a bunch of settings that you can push to all these devices. So I talk about password settings, email settings, browser settings. Do you allow iCloud, for instance? What about encryption? What about roaming? What about blacklisting of applications? You name it. All these kind of settings are possible to configure here. Also interesting is company resource access. So here you have all the possibilities to make sure that your devices can connect securely to your device. I talk about the possibility to create and to deploy certificate profiles, email profiles, VPN profiles, Wi-Fi profiles. So a lot of interesting stuff there. And then about conditional access, also worth to mention, what is that? So what you can say is you can define some health rules if you want. So yes, my device needs to be encrypted. Yes, there needs to be a PIN, stuff like that. And if your device is compliant, it will have access to your corporate resources. That can be Exchange on-prem, Office 365, SharePoint Online, OneDrive. It can also leverage the application proxy, which I have showed you some minutes ago. So that's very interesting to understand. So you select a platform here. You can then specify which are the conditional access rules that are very important for you, or you can do the newest one. For instance, also you can say, okay, I want to make sure that only iOS 9 devices are accessing my company resources. So this gives you certainly an extra level of control. So I hope you understand how nice the integration is with a world market leading tool, which is Config Manager. So a very nice story there. All right, so a little bit elaborating on conditional access. So this is actually the experience on an iPad, and in more in the scenario from, okay, a user is taking his personal iPad and he says, okay, let's now configure my emails from my company because I want to read them. Well, when he's doing that, then he will see a similar screen like this, telling him from, okay, before you can read, so that's typically the conditional access that kicks in, before you can read your email, you have to first enroll in our system. So that's one of the basic rules. So, okay, when he's doing that, he will be redirected to the Apple Store, where he can install the company portal of Intune. He will enroll his device. You still see that there is a red exclamation mark there, telling that the device is still not compliant. The reason for that in this case, that he was missing a passcode. When he has confirmed the passcode or configured the passcode, you will see that the device is healthy and that his email will flowing in. So that's typically a conditional access scenario. Okay, let's now talk about the last pillar of Enterprise Mobility Suite, which is Azure RMS, so Rights Management Services, which is actually already available for 10 years within Microsoft technology, but now you will see that Microsoft is bringing that capabilities to the cloud. And that will leverage, of course, a lot of capabilities in mobility scenarios. And this is actually the vision that they have about Azure RMS. Basically, it's giving you the possibility to share whatever data inside your company or even outside your company. And also the beauty about the story is that you have a lot of control of who is using your data, how long they can use it, and you have also excellent audit capabilities. For instance, I will show you that you will be able to see who is actually reading your documents or using your documents somewhere on the globe. So I have here a client machine, which is a client machine on-prem. You will see as soon you adopt Azure RMS, you will be able to install a certain piece of application into your Office apps, and then you see an extra button here in the ribbon. You can then do share protected. You can say, okay, I want to share this document with, again, users outside or inside the company. So you just type in the email of your recipient, you select the policy, and then you hit send, and at that moment he will actually create an email with 2 attachments, one attachment with the Office application or an Office attachment, and a second one with the Azure RMS application, because of course if you share with somebody you don't really know if he has Office installed, and if not, he can still leverage the secure Azure RMS application, which he can download for free. Once you have done that, of course, people are starting to use your data, and then you have an extra button which is called Track Usage, which gives you very good insights in what people are doing with your data. Again, you have to authenticate with the cloud, so you give in a password. See again the branding that's kicking in, so actually it's all worlds that are coming together. So let's start with entering my password here. You can see then here a dashboard with all the documents that I have shared the last period of time. So if I take the last one, for instance, and I open in a new tab, I'm able to see who is actually trying to read my documents, who is denied of reading it, and what was the last activity on my documents. So if I can see the list, then you will be able to see that the Intune user has viewed my document, he has the rights. Myself has tried it with my Getronics address, and I had no rights to do something with that data. And also very useful is the map, so you can really see where your recipients are doing something with your data on the globe. And if you say, okay, this is looks like a suspicious area, or I didn't expect that someone is using my document in whatever country, you can immediately revoke access, and everyone will lose access to your documents. So very unique insights on the market regarding mobility. In this demo, I have showed you how you can give the user the rights or the decision, let's say, to secure a document before he shares. For the sake of time, I can show you now, but again, more than pleasant to share more of you of that. But what you also can do is do more proactively encryption, where you can say, okay, for instance, each document with a string confidential inside, on our file servers, it needs to be encrypted automatically. So that kind of stuff is also possible with Azure RMS, so typically related to data classification. So with that, at the last slide of our presentation here. So this is more or less how we can help you, and actually it's very simple. It's a complete end-to-end story, so we can help you on the different layers of a project. What we often do now is sitting together with customers that has bought EMS, so help them to see what their vision is regarding enterprise mobility, how they need to integrate it with their environment. So that's typically the architectural roadmaps. We have also, of course, our consultants that can help you with the project by implementing it, by training your team on premise and so on. We have also the break and fix part, so we have partnerships with a lot of hardware vendors, so we can also deliver the mobile devices and do the break and fix and switching devices and so on. And as also Tony has explained in the beginning of the presentation, we are present around the globe, so we can also support you, let's say, following the follow the sun principle. And yeah, also there's onshore, nearshore development. We have also quite some capabilities regarding app development. Also certainly in the mobility world, that's also a very interesting business area, of course, where companies are interested to make sure that their apps are also working and touch capable on all these kind of devices that are out there. And also there we can help you. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to this webinar, and I guess we are open now for Q&A.